we'll just go ahead and get started. As I mentioned, we are trying to make our session a little bit more engaging than before. So we're starting off with some poll questions. This one's meant to be an icebreaker. Feel free to answer appropriately. As you can tell, we are football people. And it seems like our audience is split, which is okay. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Irma, and I want to welcome you to our webinar titled It's All About the Prep, How to Undo and Isolate and Restore with Confidence. We're thrilled to have you join us today. A few call outs before we get started. This session is being recorded, so if you miss any part of it or want to revisit any information, a link to the recording will be sent out for all registrants after the webinar. If this is your first time joining us, well, welcome. We hope you find it valuable and walk away with at least 1 or 2 actionable insights. And if you're not joining us for the first time, well, welcome back and thank you for tuning in. This is our 4th and final webinar in the series of this year, focusing around the S.E.C.U.R.E framework, and we're excited to dive into the undo strategies to help you restore with confidence. Throughout the session, feel free to drop your questions in the chat box. We will do our best to address them during the webinar, and we will save some time at the end to answer any of them that we might have missed. This webinar is hosted by OTAVA. OTAVA delivers secure, compliant multi-cloud solutions in a top-tier professional service to address critical modern challenges, all built on industry standards and strong collaborative customer relationships. And can't forget to call out our esteemed tech partner, Veeam. Veeam is the #1 global leader in data protection and ransomware recovery. Veeam ensures data resilience for your businesses through secure data backup, fast and reliable recovery, and data protection solutions. But before I introduce our panelists, could you let us know if you are a current customer? We have some exciting news at the end of this session, but it'll be extra exciting for our customers. So it'll just be good to know if you guys are tuning in. It seems like most of us are not current customers. Either way, this news will be exciting, so more to come on that front. And now let's introduce our SMEs. We have Chris Borowski, our product manager at OTAVA, overseeing our business resilience products with over 7 years in cloud services. Chris brings an expertise in data protection and recovery, helping business stay resilient. He's earned both his VMware and Veeam certifications, and today he's on a mission to make data protection exciting, and you'll know what I mean if you add him on LinkedIn. When he's not shaping OTAVA solutions, Chris is into fantasy sports and tabletop role-playing games such as Pathfinders. We also want to introduce Jason Keller. He's a senior system engineer at OTAVA with over 12 years of experience. Jason's journey spans everything from help desk to leading product innovation and solution engineering. He's tackled data center designs, migration, and more, blending a deep technical know-how with a hands-on approach. Off the clock, you'll find him hiking, camping, or under a Jeep, is my understanding. My name is Irma, and I'm a product and digital marketer here at OTAVA. But Chris and Jason, thank you so much for joining us and look forward to your insights and expertise. Anything else you guys want to add?
No, thanks, Irma. That was a real fun intro. I just want to point out that while it says that I am one of the SMEs here, Jason is the SME. He's got his Veeam certified architect. I'm just a lowly engineer. So when you got all your technical questions, he's the man.
Well, thanks for that, Chris.
Sounds good. So moving on, let's take a look at today's agenda. Today, we're really going to talk about at a high level what the S.E.C.U.R.E framework is. Most of our session will be spent on a real-world demonstration by Jason and Chris. They'll be tying in what's new with Veeam, and then we'll round up this conversation with next steps and a few Q&A. But before we move on to the next slide, really want to know, are you guys familiar with the S.E.C.U.R.E framework? Want to make sure that we touch on it if you guys aren't, or if we could fast forward if this is something that you guys are familiar with. I'll give it a couple of seconds. What do you think, Chris? This is our 4th one. Does our audience know it?
Hey, I'm excited to see all these yeses in the chat here. means the word's getting out.
So it seems like it's a resounding yes, which is great. So at a very high level, we'll just talk about this. For as you guys know, the S.E.C.U.R.E framework is an acrostic, but at a very high level, it's meant to meet you where you are in your journey, in your cybersecurity journey, and it's meant to provide strategies to help simplify that based on where you are. Today, we'll be focusing on the U for undo, and just at a very high level, I guess I can also talk about the components and what they are. Shrink the S, which stands for shrink the attack surface. E is examine, monitor, and analyze. C is contain the attack vectors. U is for undo, to take action, isolate, and restore. R is for recover, to achieve business continuity. And E is for evaluate, for continual improvement of your security posture. Chris, is there anything else you want to kind of touch on here?
Oh yeah, so what we're going to be focusing on today really is, the undo component, which is what we primarily focus on with our backup and data protection solutions, right? So when we talk about Veeam, that is our bread and butter data protection solution. But one of the big things that Veeam has done in the last year, starting with version 12.1 through, I think we're at 12.3 now, right, Jason?
We're at
12.3 is coming.
We're at 12.2. 12.3 is coming. It'll be the next iteration. 12.2 has had one patch so far, but that's about it.
Yeah, so with these new 12, version 12 patches, Veeam has really expanded out from just being a backup and data protection solution to encompassing a lot more of our categories here in the S.E.C.U.R.E framework. So we're going to really dive into all of those different features that come from this data protection solution and services, so we can cover off on as many bases as possible, because when we talk about security, first and foremost, it's all about layers. So let's dive into what those layers actually look like.
Okay. So I believe, Jason, you'll be taking over the screen.
Yeah, I should be taking over here. Let me get this on. And we're going to go right to our Veeam. All right. So, Chris, do you want to start us off with where we want to start talking about it, or how we do the infrastructure? Do you want me to start right there?
Yeah. Start with how we design our infrastructure, right? When we talk about deploying a Veeam solution, we're talking about primarily for our shared cloud instances, but we do have, dedicated Veeam instances for our private cloud customers or for off-premise customers. So when we talk about this, it's a little more nuanced than what we're primarily going to be talking about. We're going to be focusing on shared cloud, the multi-tenant cloud instances, and how we design our infrastructure to provide the best possible service for them.
Yep. All right. And so when we start looking at this, we talk about, kind of how we want to start transmitting that data or looking at the data. So really, in this case, a lot of things start with our backup proxies, right? So in this case, in our demo environment, we only have the one. This is a VMware backup proxy. It's only talking to that one VMware host. So in a large scale environment, large scale multi-tenant environment, you would see multiple backup proxies here. Generally, we start out with Linux proxies if we're not doing any kind of guest introspection or guest host indexing, things like that. So we start with those Linux proxies, keep them nice, secure, a current version, current long-term support, and then we move up the stack as we go. If there's any kind of guest processing, indexing, those types of things, you would see a Windows proxy that's locked down. And what we try to do is keep that all over that 6180 transmission, and then we also make sure that all traffic is encrypted from end to end. So when we're only talking to a backup network, we're talking to the snapshots, and we're not allowing any kind of interactive data, right? So no execution of scripts or anything from the customer environment into what's talking on that backup environment. So those proxies are very important, because that's how we keep all of our data segregated between not only customers, but between components within the Veeam environment.
So Jason, you touched on two things there, right? The focus on using Linux first, right? Because Linux is a little easier to harden. You get a better lockdown of the actual data mover service, the proxy, which does all of the movement from the ESXi host onto the backup storage, right? So we use Linux primarily to really keep those systems locked down to prevent any manipulation of those data movers. And then, like you said, we do encryption of the actual data movement process, and the network it's using is locked down as well. So it's only talking to the things that it needs to talk to.
Yep, absolutely. So that keeps us really secure on that back end, and make sure when we're transmitting any kind of data or files, we're keeping them locked down, and we're depositing them into the right place that's also locked down. So the proxy is a really big important tool in the Veeam backup and replication environment, because it'll allow you that communication that it needs in encryption from the VM data all the way to the repository.
Yeah, so let's talk about the right place to drop it down, right? So we have a couple different storages that we at OTAVA use. You want to walk us through, the choices that we've made there and why, and how we kind of present that out.
Yeah, so for standard backups and kind of where we're landing the data, we tend to land that on a larger scale storage system. In most cases, this is going to be like a NetApp E-series or something similar for your tier 2 kind of data storage profiles and things like that. This allows us to do is, one, it's a very secure, compliant hardware platform, but also it helps us kind of standardize and keep low overhead costs for our employees to be able to understand that. So when we're talking about that, we then present that either to the repo server. It's immutable or non-immutable. And then when we're setting up the backups themselves, that's where you set up the encryption. So per customer, we tend to want an encryption key for each customer's data, right? We don't want any encryption keys spanning multiple customers when they're deposited onto any kind of backup storage device.
Cool. Yeah, so let me double tap on two things there that you just talked about. So we encrypt it not only at the network level, not only at the data mover level, but each job is encrypted on its own with its own encryption key. So when we go back to our secure framework, right, we're talking about, holistically, we're talking about undo, but now with all of these different layers of encryption and security, we are shrinking that attack surface when it comes to your backups, right? We are limiting in as many places as possible the ability for those backups to be manipulated. And on top of that, so you talked about immutable storage, right? So we use object lock, right, for our immutable storage.
Correct. On our immutable storage, it's an S3 platform or an S3 compliant platform. So basically, it uses leverages the same APIs that most object storage uses for the best performance. And then what that brings in is that object lock. This allows you in the immutable platform to set your dates and times. So you basically turn your object storage into worm storage, right? Write once, read many, so that we can do the restores, but no one can really delete that data for whatever that timer expiration is.
Yeah, I love that. So, like you said, it's read as much as you want, right? We can always access and restore that data, but there's no overwriting it, there's no deleting it. Once it's there, and you will always have that backup copy should you ever need it. It's a really, really big thing, an important thing that Veeam has allowed us to do to give us the flexibility to do it our way, number one, right, Jason? So we can, do the object lock on the S3 compatible and really do it, in the most secure way that we think is possible and practical.
Yep, and that also right, when it looks like that too, it allows your proxies to still do the data movement the same way. It allows a standardization of ports, and it allows us to make sure that traffic continuously flows like it needs to be, and then it's even Veeam's software isn't allowed to go in and transform those data points until that expires. So once you do this and you set it to that storage, you're not going to be deleting it. Veeam will even come back to you and say, I can't do this. So if you don't set your retention periods or maybe your backup chains, you're not doing a reverse incremental on these, you're doing kind of a forward incremental, because you will have your actual full VBK and then your VIVs afterwards, and you won't be able to modify that VBK until you come up to that expiration point.
So that's another thing that's really important to, you know, as a managed service provider for us, you know, when we're designing these backup jobs and the retention points and all of that, you know, those details, it's, you know, a lot of times it can be easy to misconstrue or misunderstand what a retention point is saying it's going to do, or what a retention style, you know, you mentioned a couple different words, forever forward or reverse incremental or what have you. So being able to count on us, you know, and like I said, the Veeam certified architect to really help us design those backup jobs and those retention periods for our customers so that they don't run into those issues, right? So we, you know, we keep their storage under control. We keep that retention as long as they need it without blowing up the storage that they're using and then causing it to spiral to a point where, you know, they've got too much storage or you know, the images are way too far back.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, so when we talked about that, right, when we set an immutable on the object lock, you're setting something at the repository level that says we're not going to touch this for X amount of days. What's important about that is we're not going to be able to touch that for those days plus one, right? Because it has to unlock that next day. So when we're doing our backup chains and those types of things, we have to factor in of, hey, if this is set to 14 days immutable, then I need at day 15 to create a new VBK so then it can start the chain and continue that 14 days of immutable.
Yeah, that's awesome. Irma, I understand we have a question that we want to talk about here.
Just added it in.
All right, everybody. So what, you know, for everybody in chat, you know, let us know as we're talking about all these secure framework pieces that Veeam helps us touch on, you know, let us know what are the things that you guys are most worried about, right? When it comes to security, when it comes to everything that this framework touches, it's helpful for us to, you know, to know what the most important part is. So I see a couple answers here. We got ransomware, phishing, data loss. All right. Well, we covered off on data loss pretty good, right? Where we're talking about these backups and securing your backup, right? It's, you can do as much securing of production as you want, right? But having that second copy and third copy with, you know, copy jobs, which we can talk about more in a minute, expands that ability to recover from any data loss, whether it's accidental or malicious or what have you, right? A lot of times, you know, I shouldn't say a lot. There are times where, you know, data loss happens because of, you know, a mistake. It's not always malicious. So having a good backup, having a good secondary and tertiary backup, and having them all locked down so that you can always access them is incredibly important.
Yep. And when we're looking at phishing and ransomware and data loss, something important to remember too is with the Veeam platform, we now have our MFA abilities. We have our 4 eyes abilities. So what that allows is, one, phishing, right? Somebody's got credentials from internal now, right? Insider actions, those types of things, right? Even if it's a malicious employee trying to delete data at that point. If you have that 4 eyes on, you're going to have a second set of eyes watching those backups. Another administrator saying, yes, this is approved, or no, this is not approved, to delete that data. So that goes into the data loss, the phishing, kind of a little bit of the ransomware as well, because we've seen a lot of new ransomware out there is targeting your backup repos and your backups first. So they're trying to get rid of your backups before they start the encryption process so that you can't recover to a point in time when things were good.
Yeah. No. So you said a few things there that I really want to dive into here. So let's. So you talked about Four Eyes authorization. Let's show everybody what we mean by that, right? So when we talk about Four Eyes authorization, it's kind of what it sounds like, right? It's forcing two admins to approve any delete function, right?
Yeah, and so when we look at that, right, we've got our user roles in Veeam. So we turn on the enable multi-factor, and that allows us, one, to make sure that the person who's there is who they say they are. Everybody's familiar with multi-factor at this point. It's become life, right? Everybody is using multi-factor at this point. On the other side of that, we have an authorization for Four Eyes authorization, which requires actual additional approval for any kind of delete operations. And this means that the person who's actually authorizing this is a backup administrator or a security administrator. Generally, it's nice to have one of each that can approve these situations. And then you can see here, it'll automatically reject those pending approvals if no one says yes after 7 days or a certain time period. You can set this for whatever your compliance might be for this. And this is really important because now you're protecting yourself from yourself, right? Even if it was a non, oh, my screen just went unconnected. We'll open it up here again in just a second. But even if your insider or somebody was in there and they meant to delete a certain data set of backups, what you're really trying to do is make sure that you're connected or that they're being approved to remove that. So say somebody went in there and they accidentally picked the wrong one thinking it was the right one. Now you have that second person there that went, oh, hey, the data you sent over is not with what you actually said it in the ticket. Can we go ahead and make sure that that's the right set of data? And I'm going to
Right.
stop
So
sharing for just a second and
yeah, you're
reconnect
good.
that.
While you're doing that, I'll keep talking. So you talked about phishing, right? We talked about multi-factor. So with the Four Eyes, you really get that extra enhancement against any phishing that might happen, right? Because you've not only do you have to have so let's say a user gets compromised, a super admin gets compromised. So not only do they have to have their multi-factor compromised to get in, now they have to compromise a second user account to actually delete any of that data. So we're really locking these things down. And one of the things, so I mentioned at the top where when we're talking about this, we're primarily talking about our shared cloud, right? Which is our multi-tenant cloud infrastructure. But when we start talking about private cloud instances or client premise cloud instances, now we have the ability to give that client one of those sets of eyes to authorize any data deletion, right? So we talk to them ahead of time and say, hey, we've moved between storage platforms, right? Or storage LUNs or what have you. We're going to delete this old one. Please go double check our work. It already went through our change review process. We already have our internal change controls. But now we're giving clients the authority to double check us, to make sure that we are communicating accurately what we're telling them and their data remains secure and in place.
Correct.
So then we talk about ransomware, and you showed it a little bit when you clicked through the menu. This is one of those new Veeam 12.2 functions, malware detection. So
Correct.
Everybody's got an antivirus software on, or I hope everybody has antivirus software on all of their systems, whether that's their workstations or their servers and both. Everything that you can possibly put that antivirus on. But now we're giving you that extra layer of antivirus protection. So again, if we go back to our secure framework, right, we talked about C for contain. So now Veeam is not only touching undo where we're recovering data, it's not only shrinking that attack surface, it's now helping us contain any threats or identify any threats that might exist within client data. So do you want to walk us through that, Jason?
Yeah, so this actually starts at the beginning of the backup process. What we will show on is, so we have got our encryption detection here. That's your inline entropy analysis, right? So basically, once we turn this on, if you haven't had it on before your current set of backups, what it's going to tell you is you're going to end up going through a whole new full, and this is basically a full on the change block tracking, not a full on the actual backup itself. Because what it's going to do is it's going to analyze that workload as it's processing it. So what it does is it says, hey, here's all of the workload, and here's what our changes. And then what it does is then on the next run, it's running an analysis to make sure that nothing is encrypted or there's not a high rate of change that it shouldn't be seeing. For the customer or for your data, so that it can analyze and say, or throw the alarm and say, hey, there's suddenly a bunch of encrypted data on this disk that we're processing that wasn't there before, and now your change rate has gone from a 10% or a 5% change rate to a 50% change rate or something like that. So it's really looking for that and looking for the indicators that you have been compromised, right? And then it comes down to the next level. You've got a suspicious activity detection. What this does is it looks at those file sets on the actual repo itself and says, hey, are there any known indexed files here that say that you've been compromised by some kind of ransomware? This includes just the fact that there could be that ransomware ticking time bomb sitting there, right? Because they like to sit there for 30, 60, 90, even up to 120 days nowadays to infect your stuff. They'll get access, they'll get their keys, they'll drop just a little thing there that's just sitting, waiting to release itself. So now we're looking for those. We're watching for those malware articles, right? And then it's also watching to say, hey, these are known crypto files here, and here, and you get a mask that you're monitoring. And we've seen this on our own systems or systems that we've seen before, is Adtran routers, some of their files and OS router information is actually in a file format that's close and very consistent with some sort of malware or ransomware. So what you can do is you can either remove those extensions and say they're trusted objects, or you can say, hey, specifically look for this extension because we've noticed that we can be compromised by it because we do similar files, and that'll allow it to go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I just love this, right? So, and a lot of this, we talk about malware detection and malware response and things like that. The hardest part is finding it, right? And then once we find it, we can communicate to the customer or our client and say, hey, we noticed this, we should probably start taking a look to see if this is something that's supposed to be there. Do we need to address it? Do we need to lock it down? Did your or our, we do provide anti-malware services through one of our other partners. Did that catch it, right? Did it already act on that file? There's a lot of different things, and insight and then active communication around these findings is really, really so important.
Yeah, it really is. And, that's why we've got, right, we can trigger incident APIs. What's nice about this one is with Veeam, if it sees those or sees something like that going on, either on the entropy scanning or on the, hey, we saw this on your data set that's actually current stored with us, it will kick off an immediate backup. So you can actually tell it, on trigger of this, even if it's just a warning, kick off another backup. Get me another copy of that system and see where it sits, so that we can, one, make sure that it's isolated, and two, make sure that it's not a problem. And if it was, we can kind of have an incremental of what's going on in that system and deliver that to, a lot of people have to, with their insurance now, cybersecurity insurance will have to deliver a set of data to the to whoever's investigating. So that you'll have that, and you'll be able to have a second quick backup that you can hand off to anybody, your incident response team. And then, of course, sending your notifications not only through SNMP or through an email. In our case, it'll go to an email, and it'll actually go through our support process and make sure that it's escalated properly based on the severity of the incident.
Yeah, I love that. So we talk about, our team receives all of those notifications right directly to our support queue. They triage them and then communicate out to all of our clients, when that notification, whether it's a warning or an alert or big giant red exclamation point,
Yep.
then we can triage it and act appropriately. So for everyone in the chat, we talk about the challenges. We already talked about what your biggest concerns are. So let's talk about, what are the primary challenges that you're facing currently? So we as a service provider are always looking for, what are the things that, clients or potential clients, or just people out in the universe, right? What are the things that you're seeing the most that are keeping you up at night?
It seems like in the number one spot, it's evolving threats, following
Okay.
lack of skilled personnel, then compliance requirements, complexity of solution, and then very last, budget constraints.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. I mean, and so a big thing there was, so we talk about, lack of skilled personnel. Skilling up is incredibly important. One of the things we've talked about, if you've been to our previous webinars, our podcast that we have with our CEO TJ Husky, is really focusing on people, right, and getting your people trained up to either know what systems you have in place, knowing how to use them, how to recover them, things like that. But also just, training, know what you don't know, expanding constantly. We are in an industry that requires constant growth and constant knowledge. So, this is where, if you're uncomfortable with your team's current level of skill, come talk to us. And we have Jason Keller. He helps us make all of these really difficult decisions really easy, and he helps walk people through, potential clients and prospects and existing clients through a lot of these more complex decisions that you have to make every single day to really secure your data and secure your environment. Evolving threats is a big one. That's
Yeah.
that's a toughie, and thankfully we have Veeam doing all the great things that they're doing to help us combat all of those evolving threats.
Yep. Yeah, and you saw on I'll show it again on this malware page, right? We have the fact that this actually updates its malware definitions automatically. Veeam is using built-in antivirus and some things like that to really update these definitions and look for that suspicious activity. So that helps us there. On top of that, Veeam makes it a little bit easier for not only us but customers to actually analyze where their data is sitting, right? So in this demo environment, I've currently got a 61% score. Why is that? Well, this is connected up to our Veeam 1, so this allows us to start looking at the overview of what are we actually having, what's the problem, and why are we seeing that 61% score. And if we go over to Veeam 1, we can see under alarms, hey, what's going on? Why do I have warnings? What's going on in here? And that was actually VBO. So we'll go back to the server here, and it's telling me, hey, our best practices aren't being followed on a lot of this stuff in this demo environment. Some of it is, hey, right now you don't have your host proxy traffic set to transport in encrypted instead of network transmit mode, right? You don't have your MFA turned on, which you guys saw. I don't have it on in the demo environment. When I was in there, I was showing you that we could select it, but it's not there right now. So it's things like that they alert you to and say, hey, you're not even going against, going with your best practices. And it allows us to validate if we've deployed this to, say, an offsite customer or a customer that has a private cloud. We've implemented this new install, that we've followed our own best practices and followed each one of these down the list to make sure that we're keeping our customers as safe as possible. So that really does help. It lets us know that, hey, here's the things we're seeing, and this is why it doesn't fall into that best practices, and that's why your threat score is lower than that.
So again, we go back to our secure framework, right? So we've talked about undo, right? That's base level. Talked about shrink, talked about contain. Now we've got evaluate, right? We are actively evaluating not only the backup environment, but the production environment that the backup environment is connecting to, and letting you know, hey, here are some best practices that Veeam has identified and that we follow in our production environments. Obviously we have our demo environment that's a little bit trimmed down to really validate and show off some of these features for our demo, right? If everything's green, then we don't get to show off all the cool features.
Yep. Exactly.
So we deploy these, private cloud or client premise environment backup deployments, and now we can give them additional feedback on extra security measures, extra, infrastructure design. That if we go back to our poll, right? Complexity of solutions, skilled team members, all of these things, we're making it as easy as possible for our clients to really meet their goals in terms of security through this service, right? And through your ability, Jason, and the rest of our team, really, to analyze and interpret what Veeam is telling us, right? And how these things all play together and give that true cohesive, secure platform.
Yeah, and you've said it before, Chris. Security is layers, right? There's not one thing that's going to stop everything, right? So this helps us build those layers. And when we talk about backups in general, and as we've been talking through this, we've been talking about how do we secure those layers. Starting with the proxy. Say the proxy needs to be encrypted. We need to encrypt this data. So that moves into, now where is that data going to land? Is it going to be a regular storage, or is it going to be immutable? Regular storage, we're making sure it's encrypted at that storage. Immutable, we're making sure it's immutable right out the gate where it's landed. But not only that, when we talk about off-site customers who are using our products and we're delivering this into their environment, we deliver immutable on-site, on their site. And then generally that's going to be about your 14 days immutable, quick recovery. We want to be able to get back up and going for near term. Now we talk about compliance. Well, we have a lot of data that needs to be around for 30 days, but never be touched again, or never be touched there. So we're doing immutable into our OTAVA cloud services, right? Or to our offsite copy. So that'll actually be a longer immutable, generally about 30 days, 30 to 45 days. And then we'll take that and bring it to the archive tier, because generally once it gets to the archive tier, none of that data is going to be touched anyways, and you're leaving around a VBK for each month moving forward, and you're keeping your 7 years compliance. So we're really trying to stack those layers and make sure that the customer is protected for all of their data, and that their data is resilient to any kind of attacks that may come up.
I love that. That's the perfect summary, Jason. For everyone in chat, we're going to put up another poll here. On a scale of 1 to 5, how confident are you in your organization's ability to recover, whether from an attack or a mistake or what have you? We're talking a lot about preventative measures as you guys are answering this poll here. We're talking a lot about preventative measures, right? Because the primary focus for us as a service provider is that you never have to recover data, right? If we, and obviously that's, it's a very difficult task, right? As a lot of you mentioned, the ever evolving threat landscape. We've seen a lot of data from our partners at Veeam and from other partners where, it's really not an if, but when you do get hit by a, malicious event. So we do everything we can to prevent it. We learn everything we can about our environment and your environment as the client to set you up for the best possible response to a malware event. So I'm curious how everyone in chat feels about their current, ability to respond to one of those events. are we looking, Irma?
We
You're
got a
muted.
couple response. It sounds like we're feeling 3 out of 5 from
Okay.
what we see.
So right down the middle, right? You know, that's it's better than you know. I think I
None.
think there's a lot of mixed feelings out there, right? You know, I feel like I could probably do it, but maybe not depending on the situation, right? So that's good.
Yep.
I mean, you know, right down the average middle. I'll take it. I want to do the next one because this is going to kind of lead into our last little segment here, and we're coming up on time. So for everyone that everyone that responded, you know, you're averagely confident in your ability to recover. What parts of your current stance do you want to focus on improving the most? So we've talked about a lot of the things that Veeam can do, right? Veeam as a whole platform, and you know the options here, you know, prevention, detection, response, recovery. We're checking a lot of these boxes, and we're layering them. We're building our security ogre to really give you guys the best chance to thwart a lot of this malicious activity that's out there. So we've got prevention, detection, response. Okay, so prevention, right? Prevention's great. I love that prevention is the #1 answer up there because, you know, being as proactive as possible is the absolute best mindset, right? That's what we focus on as a company, is being as proactive as possible and setting up all of those gates along the way to give you the best fighting chance against a lot of these malicious actors. Jason, do we have any other fun things in Veeam 1 we can talk about?
I mean, there's tons of fun things in Veeam 1. I could talk all day about Veeam because I'm kind of a Veeam nerd, but what I like in prevention, detection, and response, there's a lot of alarms here that we could go through and everything like that. There's malware detection change tracking that we can do. Another one is just long-running jobs. Generally, your job should be pretty consistent. Unless you have massive change data happening all the time on a certain server, that's okay. That can be excluded. But we can really narrow down those focuses as we're building these out, and we're building just sets of alarms, because each one of these alarms can be tailored to a data set. We could set this to just a customer identity, a couple of servers, things like that. And so long running jobs will tell you, hey, all of a sudden Veeam has seen that we've gone from standard hour backups to 2-hour backups. We've seen a 200% increase in our backup times, or even 150%, and we can alarm on that, alert ourselves, let us know what's going on in that environment, which brings a lot of visibility when we go into our Veeam 1. And these dashboards can be presented through to people in your company who need to be informed. Things like your threat center to understand what your platform security, what your data health is, what kind of reports we're getting out of here. Some of my favorites are the malware detection, of course, right? How do our backups look? Do we see any anomalies? We've got 14 restore points. It's only one workload, but has there been any kind of anomaly that's let us know that there's something going on with that report or going on in that infrastructure? Veeam 1 is a gigantic platform, so we can't get through it all today, but it can actually even monitor things like your ESXi, your vCenter, System Center. It can analyze data from all of that to pull it into a dashboard and allow you to understand what's going on in your environment. Another one of mine is the job history. It tells us what was run, how long the duration was. This is a demo environment, so I don't have a machine that has a lot of change data or anything. You can see our duration for our fulls was 1 minute, right? And everything else is 50 seconds, because they're incrementals as they sit today from those. So we can see what time it ran, how it ran, what the processing rate was, what kind of our data set size was, and if there was anything new transferred, and or how big the backup size is. So that allows us to really dig in and understand what's going on in our environment, and then allows us to trigger alarms and get a response out there right away. So when we pair this with something like that inline detection that says, hey, something's going on, we're triggering another backup based on this, we're going to trigger that. But now you've got that data set, you've got your reporting to go along with it, and you can start narrowing down to when and where things happened. What machine, what time, how did this affect us, and how do we get our data back and sanitize it and stage our restores to make sure that we're ready to go with this not infecting us again once we do a restore.
Yeah, that's great. I love this report. And are these are things we can send out to the clients as well, right? Kind of like on a monthly or weekly or what have you basis.
Yep, exactly. We can send it. This particular report, I think, is set for 30 days. In our demo environment, we run these backups every 6 hours, so we have fun data sets that we can play with, right? So in this case, you'll see that we've got a couple, or 4 restore points per day, and as they run, they just kind of age out and move on. But yes, we can send these out either every backup period or as soon as an alarm's raised. All of this stuff can be tailored down to our customer's data set, what they want to protect and look at, and this falls into the compliance side of things and the response side of things too, is that we can now deliver important information to the customer at the time of, so they know what's going on and they have visibility to be able to respond correctly.
Yeah, and I love the mention of compliance there. I know everybody loves compliance audit season, but if we can make it just a little bit easier for everybody, I'm sure that all of our clients really appreciate that. I know that our internal compliance team really appreciates whenever we can make their life easy and automated.
Yep.
I think that's, we're getting pretty close here. Irma, I don't know, do you want to do our last little bit here?
Yeah, that sounds good. So let me just fast forward. Thank you so much for joining us today in our webinar covering It's All About the Prep, How to Undo, Isolate, and Restore with Confidence. We do appreciate you taking some time during your lunch hour to be with us during this interactive session. So if you haven't had your security posture assessed, I would encourage you to scan that QR code, follow that short Linktree URL that's down there. I believe we'll be dropping it in chat here shortly. And that will give you access to all our resources, including how to set up a discovery call. And after that, you would qualify for the $50 gift card as a token of appreciation for us. And we also have the news of the S.E.C.U.R.E. I don't know, Chris, if you wanted to talk at a high level what we're doing here at OTAVA, but I'll hand it back to you.
Sure, yeah. So we talk about our secure framework and trying to put the information out there about all of these different solutions we have to really make clients as secure as possible. Well, coming in 2025, we are actually going to do a hard valued version of that where we can, based on the services that you have and how they're configured and different actions that that we believe that you should be taking throughout the year and on a regular basis. How secure is your environment, right? And we talk about things like backups, right? One of the most important parts of backups is not only the preventative part of setting them up, but testing them. Because just because you have them, if you don't ever test them, you don't know if they're good. We can get all of the data we want from VM1 and from our systems, but still got to test them, right? And that applies to disaster recovery and all of these other things where we can get as much data as we can, put it into a score for you, and let you know this is how secure we think you are.
Yeah. And we have a great press release and teaser video kind of highlighting that. So if you guys want to check it out or want to learn more, highly encourage you guys to scan the QR code or follow that link that's in the chat. I don't think I saw any Q&A Questions come through. I'm checking all the boxes. Oh, here's one. Are there any specific best practices for using Veeam in a hybrid or a multi-cloud environment to maximize data security?
So this one's, I do like this question. There are always best practices around these things. Really, your best bet is to make sure that your foundation, for a hybrid infrastructure or a multi-cloud infrastructure, where that VBR lives or where your Veeam is talking out to everything else. So start there. Start at building your layers at your home base, right? So the home base in this case would be that VBR server, and then you can have it branch out. You can work your proxies into other locations into your environment. You can work on spanning the Veeam gateways so that you can talk to environments over WAN and keep it encrypted. And then for the public cloud or the multi-cloud strategy, so you say your on-site cloud is safe. Now what we want to do is deploy the devices that protect Azure, that protect your public cloud workloads, or protect your Tanzu, Kubernetes, those types of things, really, and bring it all back into that same ecosystem that is then being monitored by your Veeam One and your Veeam processes to make sure that you're still scanning it for that malware. You're keeping an eye on all of your data because data hygiene is important. Knowing where it's coming from and where it's going is going to be your best defense against any kind of ransomware or on recoverability of your data.
Jason, you forgot our friends who still practice colo, man.
Colo, same thing. That's going to be part of your cloud strategy. Even if you practice colo or you're protecting physical devices, you're going to deploy those Veeam agents, and they're going to report to that VBR. Sometimes those physical devices aren't even as close to your VBR, so that's where your gateway servers that will contact each other over the WAN become very important because it's keeping your internet traffic safe, right? It's encrypting it at both ends. It's making sure that even with a drop in internet connection, it's doing a reconnect and sending that data that's important back to where it needs to go for your data hygiene.
Thank you, Jason. That was really good.
We got a couple in there.
Okay, it's not loading for
so
me. I see. Go ahead.
How to schedule a discovery call for the continued discussion.
So if you scan that QR code or follow that URL that was dropped, I believe, by Josh in the chat, you will see that the first URL you can see is that discovery assessment. And once you do that, you'll fill out a form and one of our SMEs will contact you within 48 hours to set up that discovery call and get that $50 gift card. That's a great question. Okay, I see where you're at, Chris. And then there's another one. What's the best way to set up Veeam to ensure our data is not only backed up, but also secure against ransomware and other threats?
Go ahead, Jason.
So yeah, this is where your multi-factor authentication comes into very high importance. Whoever is your backup administrator, trust them. They should know what they're doing. And even if you do trust them, turn on your 4 eyes authentication. Those are your two best bets right away. And then making sure you turn on your inline and your repository scanning. Those malware components we showed, those are going to be your first defense against those, and that'll allow you to then connect it up to something like Veeam One for those analytics. Are your best practices being followed? Make sure you're walking through your Veeam best practices. If you don't know what those are, reach out to one of our guys. Reach out to one of our sales reps and have them do a discovery with you and work through that process with you. There's nothing more important than making sure your backups and your recovery process is validated and working properly, and that you're protecting against those insider threats. That could be an employee who clicked the wrong button. That could be an employee who is mad that they're getting laid off, something, right? Or just the fact that they might have been compromised in a phishing scam, right? Credentials can be lost so many different ways, and making sure that you have ways to prevent against internal threats is very, very important these days.
Yeah, one thing I want to add there, and it's something, we talked about a little bit at the front where we talk about the difference between Linux and Windows, right? Where we can really lock down those Linux systems. The other part of that is just making sure that your infrastructure, whether it's Veeam or VMware or Hyper-V or what have you, all of your servers, the Windows instances or Linux, keep those patches up to date, man.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
especially with Veeam, right? We get all of these new features, but we only do it if we keep it up to date, and you can only keep Veeam up to date if everything else is up to date. So
Exactly.
keep your patches rolling.
You guys think we have room for one more question? We have 2 minutes. I'm going to ask it. What's the best way to set up Veeam to ensure our data is not only backed up, but also secured against ransomware and other threats?
So following through that whole, you get the 4 eyes in there and everything else, make sure you have an offsite copy, right? Your ransomware is going to attack anything that it can with a service account that it might have compromised or an administrator account it has compromised. Separating that and pushing that to an offsite provider of some kind that has immutable storage on their side, or that it has a different login, it allows you that separation through not only logins and security profiles, but then you have that separation over the WAN. You have a copy somewhere that you can recover from, and hopefully that provider will help you get that data back, and not either on site, or if you're not confident in that on site platform, recovering it into another cloud service that allows you that separation and the ability to get up and running while you do your investigations on site.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jason, for the additional context. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, our friends at Veeam talk about 3211, right? Which is 3 different copies, 2 locations, 1 immutable and 1 offsite. That's the baseline of best practice right there when it comes to your data. If you're hitting that and then doing, everything else that we've talked about, which, is a lot, but that's kind of the baseline. I like, to me, when we talk about data resilience is if you hit that and then layer on all of these other services, you're not going to have any. You're going to minimize your problems.
Thank you, Chris and Jason, for your time, and thank you, audience, for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. We look forward to hearing more from you guys overall. And then if you haven't scheduled that discovery call with us to assess your security posture, definitely recommend it. It's a really quick, short call, and then you guys all qualify for a $50 gift card after that. So really appreciate everyone's time, and we'll call it a day. Have a good one.